Hi everybody, it's great to be back here on Itamar again, Friday morning, Erev Shabbat. Wow, amazing. Well, this week's Shabbat I'm going to be spending in Jerusalem, the wonderful city of Jerusalem. What a pleasure. But anyway, let's get down to this week's portion before it gets too late and I have to hit the road. This week's portion is called Mishpatim. Mishpatim refers to laws, and this week's portion is full of laws. It is really packed with laws. And of course, as we build a Jewish nation coming out of Egypt and receiving the Torah on Sinai, and the continuation of law, which is the fabric of the Jewish nation, a nation of Torah studiers. That's our whole life, studying Torah and taking these beautiful laws and developing them and understanding more and more about the law. Well, this week I want to focus on a question that was asked by a very, very special friend of mine. What is this whole meaning of Lo tivashel gidi b'chalev imo? What does it mean? The Torah says a person shall not cook a kid goat, in its mother's milk. Wow, and the question is a very strong question was asked. First of all, if we take the verse literally, it says a kid goat, right? Gedi. Then again, a gedi usually means, in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, it refers to a young goat in its mother's milk. So what happens if we cook milk, or cow's milk with the cow meat, or a bull, any kosher animal, or a deer, for example? What about that? And obviously, we know in Jewish law, it is not only milk and meat from a goat. It's also any of the different kosher animals. And the question is, how did from this verse we learn all of many laws we have today? 2 sinks, and we have special stoves for separating dishes and silverware, whatever. The list goes on forever. It's a very, very huge involvement in order to have a kosher home, preventing milk from touching meat. Not only that, we have to wait 6 hours between eating milk and meat. So how did this develop into such a huge system of Jewish law? And this is the question that really was asked by a friend, a very special friend. And my answer was like this. First of all, well, I didn't say the answer. This lesson is actually being dedicated to this question. So I hope this will shed some light on this. Of course, I'm just a simple human being, and God's laws is endless, no boundaries, and we can only give a few words to try to understand His ways, which are so beyond us all. That's number one. Understanding law. Sometimes we have to say, listen, we're just too small because God is so great, and what are we? But then again, of course, we have to try our best as human beings to try to understand as much as we can. And in order to understand really any law, first of all, any law written in the Torah, in a simple meaning or its literal sense, we have to realize that no way can we do such a thing. Because the Torah is much greater than the written law. The Torah, as we mentioned, Moshe Rabbeinu was on Mount Sinai, and he received much more than a written law, and he received the oral law as well. If you look at the end of this week's portion, there's direct mention of the oral law in this week's portion. A lot of people don't pay attention to this, but I want you to now. We look in chapter 24, Exodus, verse 12, and it says like this: Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, and God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Alei elai hara, come up to the mountain to me, veyesham, and be there, ve'etina lecha, and I will give you et luchot ha'even, I'll give you the stone tablets. Okay? It doesn't stop there, it goes on. Ve'atorah, and I'll give you the Torah. Then it goes on. Ve'amitzvah. Wait a second. So we have the stone tablets, we have the Torah, we have the mitzvah. There are 3 things that I mentioned over here. Asher katavti lo'otam, which I wrote in order to lo'otam, that you can teach the Jewish people. This is where, again, the source of always studying Torah comes from. You must constantly teach, and people ask questions about how to worship me and how to worship God. You have to be the teacher, Moshe, and this is where the whole system of developing Torah studies began. But here we see there's a mention again of the stone tablets, there's a mention of the Torah, there's a mention of the mitzvah. So here, if you ask any young student in Judaism who was grown up in an Orthodox home and understands what Torah is all about, obviously knows right out here this is a direct mention of the oral law over here. Otherwise, the verse is superfluous. What is it mentioning? The tablets, the Torah. What is the mitzvah? What is this mitzvah all about? The mitzvah, these are the oral law. And every different commandment of the Torah has a beautiful oral explanation in order to decipher this code, because Torah is really written in a shorthand code, and it would be like a riddle almost in many instances without the oral law for expanding and explaining to us the meaning of these different laws that God gave us. And that's right here in this week's portion in Mishpatim. So we'll bring that as an introduction to the question. Let's get back to the story with the kid goat. First of all, we have to realize when we study Hebrew, we have to focus upon every word that's mentioned in the Torah and try to understand, wait a second, what does this word possibly mean? Because this word, it may mean something in the Torah, then it may mean something else today in modern Hebrew, and sometimes words have evolved and changed. So we have to be very careful when we read a word in the Torah to understand, when you read these commentaries and these translations in English or other languages, sometimes they can really mess up a good Hebrew word and explanation. So be very careful with the words. So let's first focus. Lo tivashel, one must not cook. Okay, that's clear. Gedi. Now a gedi does not necessarily mean a goat. Now I'm going to shed some light on that. A gedi could also mean a young, different animals. It could mean not only a goat, it can also mean a cow, or it can mean also a young kosher animal as well. Now, people, of course, when it says in the Torah, Gedi Izim, it refers directly to a goat. Gedi Izim, when it's a Gedi of an Eiz meaning a goat, then it refers directly to a goat. But here it doesn't say Gedi Izim. It doesn't say a goat, a kid goat. It just says Gedi alone. When Gedi stands alone, it could also mean, of course, other kosher meat as well. That's number one. Now, why did it have to say a young? Gedi definitely refers to a young animal. That's another question. And why did it have to say it's mother's milk? Why just say it's milk of another animal? And here again is a very simple explanation, which I saw in Rav Vali, beautiful commentator, and he writes it very simply, that a mother's milk, we may say, is that since the mother is so close to the child itself, we may say, okay, here it's not really a problem since it's similar. So it's like someone eating an animal, different parts of an animal. So it's, a child is part of the mother, so it shouldn't really be a problem maybe in this instance. No. He's saying if you're not allowed to eat a gedi in its mother's milk, all the more so you can't eat if it's not its mother's milk, because there's much more of a separation. And so we see here the verse really can refer to, easily referring to other animals. That's not a problem at all. That really resolves that issue. But another question is, why does it mention to cook? Lo tivashel. Why can't it say directly you shall not eat? Well, the answer our rabbis mentioned, there are 3 times that this verse is mentioned in the Torah. It's mentioned once over here and 2 other places in the Torah, and we learn out that there are 3 different laws we learn out referring to eating a goat in its mother's milk. Number 1, I use the word goat, an animal in its mother's milk. 1, you cannot cook it, you cannot have any enjoyment from it, and you cannot eat it. These are the 3 different laws that are learned out. And therefore, it is mentioned 3 times in the Torah. And why is it mentioned in the form of cooking? Because we may say, even if you didn't cook it, if it was just cooked in that particular way, you cannot have any enjoyment from it at all. For example, let's say someone else, a non-Jew, has no problem of eating this or cooking it. He cooked it for you. You cannot use it. You can't have any enjoyment. You can't give it to your animal. You can't fertilize your garden with it. You can't have any enjoyment with the combination of these particular ingredients, milk and dairy together. But now the question comes, we must ask ourselves, is why? What is really the problem of having milk and meat together? Why not? Well, again, as mentioned beforehand, we are human beings, and we don't know all of God's ways and why possibly He would create such a law. The Rambam, the famous Maimonides, does bring down an explanation of. We suggested an explanation. This was a practice of the idol worshippers. They would do such a thing, and therefore it was an abomination to God. That's one of the sources behind this law itself. And of course, what is known later on, mentioned that this was found later on as a definite practice of these Canaanites in Israel. They would do such a thing. But again, this is only one explanation of a possibility. Okay, this is what the Canaanites did. It was an abomination. But much more than that. We realize that the Torah is so much higher than a reason like that. Although it's a beautiful reason, and that's, I'm not going to go forbid the Rambam, the great giant of the Rambam, giving a reason and such a reason, but that is only on one level. There are much, much higher reasons behind these things, and that we don't know. The Torah is so powerful and so infinite that we really cannot know. We really will never know all the reasons behind everything. One day when we reach a higher spiritual level in a different world, we will know more, of course. But even here, our rabbis in the Kabbalistic writings mentioned and discussed what milk and meat, why can't you mix the two together? One of the reasons that they give is that milk represents chesed, kindness, and meat represents din, judgment. And therefore, you shall not mix the judgment together with the kindness over here. You're causing some very, very deep orders of spiritual order to be confusion of spiritual order. And we have to really maintain spiritual order and separation, and sometimes we cannot combine these things. And so on a deep spiritual level, by doing that, we are affecting spiritual worlds by combining. Just like kilayim. Kilayim means, why can't you graft two trees together? In Judaism, you're not allowed two trees from different species, you cannot graft together. Or you can't have different animals like a horse and a mule, a horse and a donkey, you can't graft. This is against the Torah itself. Why? What's the problem? So you're sort of going against nature, you're going against things that are not meant to be together, and you're trying to combine them. This is again in a spiritual, Kabbalistic sense, which I'm not going to develop now in this short lesson, but this is a whole another higher explanation of just maybe because it was practiced by these idol worshippers. But of course we can even combine them and say this is part of idol worship, is actually doing such a thing as trying to confuse the spiritual worlds and damage the spiritual abundance that comes from above. And by us practicing Hashem's law, we are allowing spiritual energy to flow. We are not causing confusion or breaks in the spiritual pipelines. So there's a lot more depth behind it. But you have to understand that just like any one of God's laws, there is infinite amount of explanations and reasons behind. But as us as a people, that's why the Jewish nation said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and then we will listen. First of all, we will do. God commanded us not to enjoy from milk and meat, eat it, cook it, or any enjoyment from it, and we're going to accept it without any questions attached. Later on, once we accept it, then we can of course try to expound and learn and discuss and try to figure out maybe what would be a reason behind this law. But that is really the most deepest thing to understand, that sometimes it's just beyond us. Just like the law of the red heifer is something that King Solomon said, wow, this is such a great commandment, it's beyond my understanding. He was the wisest man on earth, and he said this is one command that he couldn't really understand, the reason behind the red heifer. So again, the law is on a very, very high level. Sometimes we just can't understand what every law means. But then again, from here, I'm not cooking the milk and meat together. Let's say someone took a piece of meat and he soaked it all day long in milk. There would be no problem there. The whole commandment, according to the Torah, I'm saying, the whole commandment is not to cook it together. So how do the Jewish people today? We have separate kitchens and separate silverware, and we don't, separate stoves, and we're so careful not to go near milk. And not only that, we wait 6 hours between eating milk and meat. So you have a lot more laws that really weren't even mentioned here in the Torah, and that's the beauty called the rabbinic law. The rabbinic law is when someone loves something so much, just like you have a special, let's say, whatever treasure in your house, and you want to protect it, so you put it in a case and you cover it and you shine it up and you really protect it. And the same thing, the rabbinical law stems from that one love of Hashem. The love of Hashem's Torah so much that we protect the law, we put fences around the law in order to show how much we love that law. And therefore, even waiting 6 hours between milk and meat, and doing and separating between the dishes and all the additional things that we do, is just to show how much we love Torah, how much it's so important to us, and we just want to make it more beautiful and decorate it more. And that's the whole rabbinic system of adding on to the law. And of course, it's not a suggestion for us as practicing Jewish people. We must abide by rabbinic law, because that again is a written law that one must not move from our rabbis from left to right. When they command us, we have to follow them. On their high spiritual levels, they knew how to preserve, and they were connected so much to Hashem that they knew how to beautify and add on to the Lord, just to make it more beautiful and decorated. Well, it was great being back with you all again. Have a fantastic Shabbat, and I'll see you next week. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.